Imagine a viral social media clip where a guy stands precariously on a dining chair, heels dangling, trying to nibble a cucumber slice, looking like a desperate giant fruit, yet strangely appetizing. Now, imagine the instant he grimaces at the soggy texture, bolts upright, and clumsily bumps into a lamp. That sudden jarring shift where your stomach drops and the spark dies instantaneously, what we call the ick, and it is absolutely devastating for the modern dating process. This isn't a slow burn, it's a hard digital brake slam that occurs with absolutely zero logical reasoning. Psychological, the ick is a rapid, visceral rejection triggered by a subtle behavioral cue that instantly shatters the romantic fantasy. It acts like a psychological immunization response that misfires at the weirdest, most benign times, causing you to lose all attraction simply because someone expressed a weird opinion or breathed a little too loudly. It disqualifies potential partners instantly, without giving them a fair chance to speak, turning a warm connection into a cold sweat in seconds. To explain why our brains play such cruel tricks on us, we have to look at the messy, confusing science behind this sudden attraction killer. Imagine you are perfectly happy with someone 1 minute. The chemistry is sparking. And then, bam! They make a weird sound like a wet sneeze or awkward throat clearing. And suddenly you feel physically repulsed. That visceral shift isn't just a mood swing. It is a biological emergency. Dr. Sarah Hagen calls this the snake theory, and it changes everything we know about dating. The ick, she argues, isn't just a feeling. It is literally a simulated serotonin crash. Your brain acts like a high-level security system. When it detects a threat, even something subtle like bad posture or an awkward habit, it immediately cuts the serotonin supply to force a feeling of disgust. It is an evolutionary hard stop, designed to push you away from incompatible partners before you waste any more time. When you get the ick, don't feel guilty. Just know your brain is frantically trying to salvage your serotonin levels. There is a peculiar kind of frustration in trying to bargain your way out of that sudden shift in attraction, where you find yourself standing in the wreckage of a good date, armed with a spreadsheet of someone's virtues, listing their income, their humor, their kindness, while they are simultaneously eating a taco with their eyes closed. It feels completely illogical, like trying to glue a shattered vase back together using blue taping. You try to rely on logic to explain away that gross feeling, but the ick doesn't follow a curriculum. It operates like a biological virus that mutates instantly upon contact with the slightest imperfection. Evolutionarily, your body likely views this as a form of contamination or a betrayal of social codes, triggering a primitive disgust response deep in the amygdala that completely eclipses the rational part of your brain. It is not that the person changes, it is that the lens through which you see them has evaporated, and suddenly the fantasy looks like a cheap costume. You cannot scrub a memory that is already painted in neon red. You aren't making a conscious choice to be uninterested anymore. You are simply waiting for the process of elimination to finish its work. So ask yourself this: how fast is this feeling moving once your subconscious says, "I'm done"? There's nothing quite as jarring in the modern dating landscape as the sudden onset of the ick, that visceral, secondhand embarrassment that hits you like a ton of bricks, completely disarming the romantic chemistry and replacing the spark with the cold, gritty sensation of rejection. Psychologically, this phenomenon is fascinating because it is rarely about the big picture. Instead, it is triggered by subtle breaches of social protocol that shatter your imagined, idealized version of a partner. Have you ever watched a date for the very first time, only to be hit by the ultimate buzzkill when they enthusiastically inhale their food with their mouth wide open? Or perhaps they aggressively order complex dishes they clearly cannot handle without gagging? Or how about when the conversational tides turned and they suddenly started reciting obscure legal precedents as if we were in a high-stakes courtroom rather than a cozy cafe? It is those specific awkward pauses that cue our brains to recoil. And nothing slams the romantic brakes faster than the disorienting moment of realizing you've already met, only to watch them happen to forget your name 5 minutes later. These specific behaviors aren't just annoying annoyances. They signal profound social incompetence that kills our instinctual drive. We crave partners who are reliable and polished, and nothing destroys that fantasy faster than the sheer awkwardness of unpreparedness. Stick around because understanding these triggers is your best defense against losing interest without meaning to. Imagine you are on a date with total perfection, the kind of person who seems too good to be true, until suddenly they do something repulsive. Maybe they slurp soup or chew with their mouth wide open. In that split second, that goddess turns into a nightmare, and you feel a visceral physical rejection. This is the ick, and according to evolutionary psychologists, your brain isn't just being superficial, it is running a rapid-fire defense mechanism from our ancient past. Our ancestors couldn't Google background checks, so they relied on gut instincts to filter for mating success. That sudden disgust wasn't just about manners, it was a survival alarm designed to stop you from settling for a partner who looked good enough on paper, but was actually incompatible for the long haul. Basic hygiene errors signaled potential parasites or disease, behaviors suggested a lack of cooperation, and looking too eager signaled susceptibility to poaching by rivals. Essentially, your brain is performing a high-stakes compatibility test without you even realizing it. The ick is a sophisticated anti-poaching system, screaming, "Don't lock eyes with this person because they will drain your resources or infect your tribe." It feels gross in the moment, sure, but often, your intuition is simply trying to save you from a catastrophic mistake before you ever get attached. If you trust Hollywood, the ick sneaks up on you right at the climax of a romantic movie, maybe during a passionate kiss, but in reality, it hits you like a sudden wave of dysentery at the most inconvenient times, like when you catch them picking their teeth with a fork or chewing with their mouth open during a quiet dinner. This timing is a psychological disaster because the ick thrives on the incongruity between your ideal fantasy and whatever gross behavior is actually occurring in front of you. It's not just about hygiene, it's a visceral chokehold that triggers a primal fight-or-flight anxiety that implies a hard, sudden stop. Suddenly, the person you thought was perfect transforms into a clown in your mind, and you are seized by the terrifying fear that you are about to emotionally sabotage a perfectly good connection over something as petty as a sticky glass of water or a monotone burp. It turns the hopeful flights of early romance into a minefield of humiliating potential mishaps, leaving you paralyzed not just by the moment, but by a sudden nagging anxiety that your biological braking system is malfunctioning and arbitrarily rejecting a good thing too early. That sudden, stomach-aching nausea in your gut isn't always a permanent exit sign. Behavioral science suggests you can actually train your brain to override that disgust, essentially diluting the signal over time. Think of it like tasting a new spice. The flavor is harsh at first, but if you keep using it in the right dishes, your palate eventually learns to accept it. This happens constantly in relationships where initial cringeware, like a specific laugh or a quirky habit, made my skin crawl in the early stages. But as the dopamine fades and we build something real, that visceral ick often evaporates. We realize the connection outweighs the weirdness, proving you can indeed fall in love, despite baggage. However, we must be honest about the psychology of the exception. Sometimes that ick isn't just a passing mood. It is your primitive survival instinct signaling a genuine red flag. You can't push past every warning without consequence. So, stick around because we need to answer the hardest question of all. What do you do when the brain refuses to look past the disgust? Let's untangle the confusing chaos between a sudden, irrational twitch and a glaring stop sign. The ick is this terrifyingly fast version of the stop arm that slams down solely because a date chewed on their necklace or replied to a Slack message while laughing at a joke you didn't tell. It is, without exception, a trigger avoidance, where your brain prioritizes immediate comfort over curiosity, essentially granting you a medical excuse to flee without having to do the hard work of analyzing safety. It feels visceral, but it is usually skin-deep, a minor annoyance like lint on the sweater. Contrast that with a red flag, which isn't about manners or habits, but about inherent toxicity, like watching them dismissively haggle over a bill or laugh while recounting how they ghosted their last partner. Psychologically, the ick acts as a temporary buffer to disconnect your emotional investment quickly, whereas a red flag is an authentic assessment of compatibility that should have you running for the hills. You can't fight the ick with logic, but if you're suddenly feeling dread instead of just revulsion, you don't need a reason to leave. You just need to listen to the alarm bells that the ick is trying to muffle. Getting the ick feels like a sudden brick hitting your forehead, right? That visceral cringe when your crush does something mundane isn't just a personality quirk. It's a psychological alarm system designed to protect your ego. When you are this easily triggered, it highlights a perfectionist streak running wild in your subconscious. You aren't reacting to a stain on a shirt. You're reacting to the shattering of an idealized, imaginary version of reality. This hypersensitivity suggests a struggle with emotional flexibility, revealing deep-seated trust issues where your brain subconsciously scans for defects the exact second intimacy starts to feel real. It shows a lack of the resilience required for vulnerability, because if the mood shifts, your attraction instantly dismantles instead of adapting to it. Basically, you're protecting your fantasy because the reality is too messy to handle. If you never learn to look past this snap judgment, you'll never find the stability you're actually craving. So let's dive deeper to decode exactly what this reaction says about your future.